The square was crowded. It was late afternoon. The sun painted the old building fronts in gold, and people rushed by holding bags, backpacks and phones. Cars honked, sellers shouted their deals, and in the middle of that urban mess there was a sad quiet that only a few could feel. Sitting on the cold ground with his back leaning against a pole was a boy of about 11. His face was covered in dust. His bare feet were cracked, and the loose, faded shirt barely covered his thin skin. In front of him, a flipped matchbox worked as a piggy bank. Inside, a few scattered coins. So few they seemed to mock the hunger he carried. He looked at every person walking past, hoping someone would stop. But most turned their eyes away. Some even laughed. Others just acted like he wasn't there. The boy didn't beg out loud. He only let the silence and his sad eyes speak. Suddenly, the roar of a strong engine cut through the square. A shiny black luxury car parked right in front. People stopped to stare. It wasn't common to see such an expensive machine around there. Out stepped a tall man in a flawless suit, joined by two friends dressed just as well. All wore flashy watches that shone like gold. The millionaire, because just one look was enough to know he wasn't ordinary, walked with steady steps. Arrogance seemed to pour from every move. He laughed loud, pulling eyes his way, and soon noticed the boy on the floor. "Look at this," he said, pointing at the kid with a sneer. "A masterpiece of misery." His friends laughed. It wasn't humor, it was cruelty. The boy lowered his head even more, ashamed. "Hey, kid," shouted the rich man. "How much did you make today with that pitiful face?" The boy didn't reply. He just pressed his hands against his knees, trying to shrink. "Are you deaf?" the man pressed, stepping closer. "Or just rude?" The tension drew a crowd. Some people stopped to watch. Others quietly raised their phones, sensing something was about to happen. The rich man looked around, pleased with the attention. Then he grinned and pulled a coin from his pocket. It shined. Small change for him, but for the boy it could mean bread. He tossed it on the ground, letting it roll close to the kid's bare feet. "Want this coin?" he asked. "Then give me a show. Sing something. I want to laugh." The boy's heart raced. He lifted his eyes, stunned. "What?" he whispered, barely audible. "That's right," the man crossed his arms. "Sing, or that coin stays on the floor." The friends laughed harder. One mocked, "Let's see if this beggar's got talent, or if he only knows how to beg." People around began murmuring. Some were curious, others upset. The boy breathed deep, holding back tears. He wanted the coin. He wanted to run. But inside, something told him to stay. A memory of his mother came to him. Her soft voice, "When the world pushes you down, use your voice to rise. Sing, my son. Sing and never be ashamed of who you are." He swallowed hard. His eyes filled with tears, but not of fear, of courage. The millionaire clapped his hands, impatient. "Come on, boy, we're waiting." The square fell silent. Even the sellers stopped shouting. Every eye was on him. He hesitated, looked at the coin on the ground, then at the man. Slowly, he rose. His knees shook, his skinny body seemed ready to fall, but he stood tall. "Going to sing or not?" one of the friends mocked. The boy shut his eyes for a moment, breathed deep, and opened his mouth. The first note came out weak, almost a whisper. Some laughed, but then, as if something awoke inside, his voice grew, clear, in tune, full of feeling. Not the song of a street kid, the song of someone born for music. The laughter faded, replaced by deep silence. People glanced at each other, stunned. The rich man raised his brows, surprised, but quickly faked a laugh. "Just a trick," he muttered, uneasy. But no one seemed to believe that. The boy's voice filled the square like it belonged on a stage. He sang with tears streaming, each word heavy with pain and hope. The crowd edged closer, forming a circle around him. Some filmed, others stood still, shivering at the sound. A woman in the audience put her hand on her chest and let out a sob. A young couple hugged, moved to tears. Even kids who had been playing stopped to listen. The millionaire, who had set the whole scene just to laugh, was now uneasy. He didn't know where to look. The boy, on the other hand, seemed to have forgotten everything. The hunger, the shame, the torn clothes. There was only him and the music. When the last note faded, a few seconds of absolute silence followed. Then the square erupted in clapping. People shouted, some cried, others kept recording non-stop. The boy breathed deeply, short of breath, and looked around. For the first time, he didn't feel invisible. The millionaire, lost for words, just stood still. The face that once carried arrogance was now marked with shock, and at that moment everyone understood. The real show wasn't the humiliation he had planned, but the hidden talent nobody expected. The sound of applause still echoed through the square. The boy kept breathing deeply, trying to grasp what had just happened. For a moment he forgot about hunger, about cold, about shame. He felt alive. He felt like someone. But the rich man wasn't pleased. He couldn't stand that. In front of so many eyes, he had lost control of the situation. His plan was to embarrass, to make people laugh at the boy's misery. And now, instead of laughter, there was clapping. "Enough," he said, trying to hide his discomfort with a mocking grin. "That was cute, but it's not worth more than this." He pulled another coin from his pocket and spun it between his fingers, as if it were a prize. Then he tossed it to the ground with the same scornful tone. "Take it. That's all your voice is worth." The boy looked at the coin, then at the millionaire. This time, he didn't bend down. He stood still, chest rising and falling quickly. The crowd began to murmur. That gesture had been even more cruel. A woman in the audience, outraged, shouted, "Aren't you ashamed? The boy just sang like an angel, and you throw change like it's trash?" The millionaire laughed, unfazed. "Angel? This?" He pointed at the boy. "That's not talent, it's luck. Bet it was just one song memorized." His friends laughed again, trying to bring back the mockery. But the crowd no longer reacted the same. The claps turned into looks of disapproval. People whispered, shaking their heads. The boy's heart pounded. He could have stayed quiet. He could have picked up the coins and gone back to his corner. But something inside wouldn't let him. It felt like this was his only chance to prove he wasn't just a beggar. He breathed deep and shut his eyes. Then he started singing again. This time his voice wasn't shy. It came out steady, strong, more powerful than before. He chose a tough song, the kind only a few professional singers manage without missing a note. Each line was like an arrow shot at the millionaire's cruel words. The crowd reacted instantly. Some covered their mouths, shocked. Others raised their phones higher, recording every second. The millionaire tried to keep his grin, but his eyes gave him away. The more the boy sang, the clearer it became. This wasn't a trick. It wasn't luck. It was real talent. One of his friends whispered, "Man, he's actually good." "Shut up!" the rich man snapped, annoyed. Meanwhile, the square turned into a real stage. People rushing by stopped to watch. Kids came closer, amazed. Even street vendors left their goods aside to listen. In the middle of the crowd, a young man held up his phone and started a live stream. In seconds, hundreds were watching online. "Check this out," he told the camera. "This street kid is shutting down a stuck-up millionaire." The song carried on, more moving with every note. The boy sang with his eyes closed, as if telling his own story. His voice held hunger, pain, abandonment, but also hope and strength. It was impossible not to feel chills. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, but then the square burst into applause louder than before. Shouts, whistles, claps that roared like thunder. The boy breathed heavily, but his gaze was steady. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel ashamed of who he was. The woman who had shouted earlier stepped toward him, crying, "My child, you sing like you've got heaven inside you." He smiled shyly, not knowing what to say. Meanwhile, the millionaire tried to regain control. "Don't be fooled," he shouted, waving his arms. "This changes nothing. He's still a beggar." But this time, no one laughed. No one joined in. On the contrary, eyes turned against him. There was scorn, outrage, even anger. A man in the crowd shouted, "The real beggar is the one with no kindness in his heart." People clapped at the line as if it were part of the show. The millionaire was left speechless. The boy then stepped forward. He stared straight at the man who had tried to shame him from the start. His voice, though calm, carried more weight than any shout. "I'm not a beggar. I have a voice, and it's worth more than your money." The whole square shook. The crowd started clapping on their feet like they were at a big concert. The rich man, without a word, just clenched his teeth. From that moment, things had shifted. He was no longer the center of attention. The boy had taken his place, and everyone knew this was only the beginning. The echo of the boy's last words still rang across the square. "I have a voice, and it's worth more than your money." People repeated it like a chant, one to another, as if they had just heard the simplest, most powerful truth in life. The millionaire tightened his jaw. He tried to keep his posture, but sweat began sliding down his forehead. His friends, who had laughed so loud before, now looked at each other awkwardly. The crowd stared at them with disapproval. The boy, standing in the middle of the circle, seemed taller than his own height. His body was still thin, his clothes still torn, but something in him had changed. It was as if he had gained an invisible strength. Then it happened. Someone shouted from the audience, loud and clear, as if speaking for all. "This boy sings better than plenty of famous artists." The remark was met with cheers and more clapping. Another voice added, "It's true! He's got more talent in one song than those radio singers who are nothing but products." The buzz spread. People started filming up close, clapping and cheering. The boy looked around, not fully understanding, but feeling inside his chest a fire he had never known. The millionaire, trying to pull things back, raised his hands as if to calm the crowd. "Let's cut this nonsense," his voice came out forced. "This isn't a show. It's just a street kid trying to take advantage of your pity." But no one seemed to care. Instead, a woman stepped closer and spoke loud. "Pity? No, sir, this is talent. And talent deserves respect." The applause grew stronger. The millionaire grew even more tense. The boy, without a word, lowered his head. He was too moved. But when he lifted his eyes again, there was a firmness not seen before. He was no longer the shrunken kid from a few minutes ago. Now he had discovered something stronger than fear. His own voice could protect him. Then someone in the crowd raised a phone and started streaming live. "Guys, you need to see this," the person said on the broadcast. "A millionaire tried to humiliate this street kid, but look what happened." In seconds, comments popped up on screen. "What a voice! This is unreal! Somebody help this boy!" Meanwhile, the rich man twisted inside. He hated losing. Even worse, he hated losing in front of the poor, in front of ordinary people. His wealth had always been his shield against shame. But now, standing before a dirty, barefoot kid, he felt exposed. Trying to get some control back, he stepped forward and said in a challenging tone, "If you're that good, sing again. But pick something tough, something that proves it wasn't luck." The crowd reacted with outrage. "Leave him alone," some shouted. "Isn't it enough?" others asked. But the boy breathed deep. Instead of stepping back, he lifted his chin. "I'll sing." Silence filled the square. Everyone waited for the next move. The boy closed his eyes, breathed deep, and began a new song. This time it wasn't a simple tune, but a demanding melody, full of high notes and sharp shifts. A song even many trained singers avoided live. His voice spread through the space like a soft thunder, strong and gentle at the same time. Each note struck deep into listeners' hearts. People shivered, some cried, others just stayed frozen, unable to believe what they heard. The millionaire tried to hold his superior air, but couldn't. The more the boy sang, the more the crowd turned on him. One of his friends whispered, uneasy, "This is getting bad, man. Let's go." "No!" the rich man shot back, firm but with a trembling voice. "I won't be beaten by a kid." The song ended with a long, flawless note, held with such feeling it seemed to split the sky. When the last sound faded, the square exploded in deafening applause. "Bravo!" some shouted. "This boy is a genius," others said. The woman who had defended him before came closer again, emotional. "You're not just a singer. You're a voice that was born to be heard." The boy smiled shyly, but stayed quiet. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break out of his chest. Meanwhile, the millionaire was under more and more pressure. There was no laughter left to back him up, only looks of disapproval. What began as a cruel joke had now turned into his own public humiliation. He tried once more to take control, but his voice no longer carried the same weight. "This won't change anything. He'll still be on the streets tomorrow, and you'll forget." But the crowd answered in unison, "No, we won't forget." People raised their phones, recording every moment. The image of the boy, dirty but standing tall like a true performer, was already spreading online. Comments popped up in real time. "Somebody needs to give this kid a chance. That millionaire should be ashamed. His voice is pure gold." The rich man was breathing hard. For the first time, he was surrounded not by praise, but by the collective scorn of the people. And the boy, at the center of it all, finally realized it wasn't him being humiliated in that square. It was the man who tried to crush him and ended up beaten by the power of a voice no one expected. That was the turning point. The story was no longer about a poor kid. It was about an artist discovering, in front of everyone, that his gift could change everything. And deep down they all knew nothing would be the same again. The last applause took long to fade, as if the whole square was breathing together. The boy was still standing, chest heaving, face wet with sweat and emotion, yet his chin stayed lifted. There was dignity in that simple stance, and that was what bothered the millionaire more than any perfect note he had sung. The man wiped his face to clear the sweat shining under the late sunlight. His tie choked his neck. Suddenly, the expensive suit felt like a heavy disguise. He looked around and saw only phones raised, tense eyes, whispers that were no longer curious, but judging. His friends, once loud, were now quiet, trading uneasy glances like men sensing a storm. "Enough of this show," said the millionaire, forcing a laugh that couldn't hide the shake in his voice. "You people get touched by anything. It's easy to move a crowd with sad stories and a couple rehearsed tunes. The boy got lucky, that's it. Luck." A woman, the same who had defended the kid, stepped forward, her hair tied back with a plain scarf, eyes steady, voice unafraid. "Calling talent luck is just a coward's way of refusing to see another's worth. What this boy has, no money can buy." Some clapped. The millionaire laughed mockingly, lifting his hands as if showing off a cheap trick. "Very nice, good citizens, but I say this, if it's talent, then it needs proof. Sing again, kid, and pick something tough. I want to see if you can keep the tone, if you don't go off key, if you don't run out of breath. Come on, prove it." The square reacted like one body. There were boos, shouts of protest, a chorus of "Leave the boy alone," but also a charged silence, an electric tension holding everyone there. The boy looked down at his bare feet, then at the flipped matchbox with its few coins. When he lifted his face, his eyes were clear. There was no anger, no challenge, only a quiet certainty. "I'll sing if I want to," he said, low but steady, "but I won't sing for you to laugh at me." The millionaire smiled, poisonous. "You'll sing because I say so. Or do you want to show you're ungrateful even when given attention? Without me, no one would have even stopped to look. I made you shine for a minute, boy. Me!" That heavy "me" made the crowd go still for a second, and the boy, without looking away, breathed and replied, "I shine because I have a voice." You only turned the light of shame on yourself. The impact of those words was clear. People filming zoomed in closer. The millionaire clenched his jaw, neck rigid. He stepped forward twice, taking up space, trying again to crush the boy with his presence. "Let's see how far that voice goes," he said, turning to his friends. "Clear the way. If they want a show, I'll give a show. Bring a mic." He laughed, theatrical. "Oh, right. The poor live without gear. So sing to the wind, prodigy. Show what you're made of." The boy closed his eyes, and silence fell like a curtain. The murmur stopped. The air itself seemed to hold its breath with the square. When he sang, the first note came out pure, so sharp it felt like it drew a line through the air. The melody he chose rose and fell, demanded breath, focus, courage. And as he sang, his thin arms found their own rhythm, like he was leading an invisible orchestra. There was no track, no guitar, nothing but the raw, honest sound. The millionaire folded his arms, trying to hide his unease. One of the friends muttered, "Man, he doesn't miss a note." "Shut up," hissed the millionaire, eyes locked forward. The singing carried on. The voice grew warmer, fuller, as if pulling up memories too painful to face. Those around could feel it. This wasn't a show, it was a confession. When the last note faded, no one clapped right away. First came a collective sigh, and then the applause broke out like rain falling after a long drought. The millionaire raised his hands, trying to shout over the storm of claps. "Enough!" he yelled. "Enough! You're all under a cheap trick. Want emotion? I buy emotion and hand it to you in a real concert. But you won't make me believe a street kid is worth more than years of training, than skill, than stage, than—" "He's got life," someone cut him off. "And that's what most stages lack." The man laughed, wounded. "Life? Life is what you buy with comfort, with safety, with stability. Life is what I give to hundreds of workers who pay bills because I grind every day. Don't clap for naivety. He sings here today, tomorrow he's back sleeping on the ground. That's how the world works." The words landed like stone. Some lowered their eyes, shaken by the harsh truth. The boy, though, didn't shrink. His chin lifted higher. "I know how the world works," he said slowly. "I sleep on the ground, but the ground taught me to rise." Someone started clapping again. Others followed. The millionaire lost his rhythm. He tried another tactic. "Fine," he said, sweeping the circle with his eyes. "Let's be practical then. If your voice is worth that much, take this." He pulled a stack of bills from his pocket. "Sing one more, but this time my choice. Sing what I pick. I pay well. I buy your music." Phones shifted. The word "buy" hung heavy, stuck to the money. The boy looked at the bills, then at the man's face, holding the pause longer than any lecture could. "My voice is not for sale," he said. "Not for little, not for much. Everyone's got a price." The millionaire shot back cold. "What's yours? A roof for a night, a plate of food, a pair of sneakers." His voice grew rougher. "Be smart, kid. The world's about deals. You sing what I say, how I say it, and I make sure you don't go hungry tonight. That's a fair trade." The crowd rippled. Outrage, shock, anger. A young woman stepped forward. "What you're doing isn't trade. It's abuse. Whoever offers food to buy someone's dignity is selling their own soul for scraps." "Scraps?" He raised the cash. This is more than he'd see in months. "You dreamers don't fill stomachs." The boy then stepped closer. The gap between them now carried meaning. He wasn't defying. He was standing firm. "I already know hunger," he said. "I won't know shame." The silence grew heavy. The millionaire clenched his fist. For a moment, his eyes flickered. Then he laughed, but the laugh cracked. "Pretty courage. Let's see how long it lasts when the cops get here," he said, pulling out his phone. "There are rules for public space. Disturbance, crowding, illegal trade. I know every code. If you won't shut up for awe, you'll shut up by law." The words spread like cold wind. Some stepped back. Others instead drew closer, protective. The woman with the scarf didn't move. "Call," she said. "Call and explain you called the police because a boy sang." The millionaire's throat tightened. He didn't call. He shoved the phone away, abrupt, like a man realizing he'd lost the battle of image. Then he tried another angle, one that always worked in his boardrooms: belittle through technique. "You sing on instinct," he said with calculated scorn. "But real technique? Do you know intervals, range, diaphragmatic breathing? Know what a passaggio is, a controlled vibrato? Or do you just copy what you hear?" "I know what life taught me," the boy answered calm. "I learned to breathe in the shadows, to hold a note when hunger pressed, to control my voice when pain tried to take everything. If that has a school name, I don't know it, but I learned, and I keep learning." The murmurs shifted into respect. Someone said, "That's it," as if signing a statement. The millionaire, cornered, pointed to his shiny shoes, as if reminding everyone he was still the powerful man here. "You're watching an emotional trick," he pressed. "It's easy to clap for the beaten down. Hard is building something that lasts. Singing here doesn't change anyone's fate." The boy nodded, without sarcasm. "Singing here changes my today," he replied. "And sometimes today is what separates the end of hope." The honesty of the line cut through like light. The square, already on his side, seemed to move one step closer. The millionaire, realizing, tried one last strike. "Then prove you're not just emotion." He pulled a paper from his pocket and scribbled quickly. "Here, a phone number. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock at my company. If you sing for my guests, I'll give you a job as—" He paused briefly, searching for the cruelest word. "An entertainer. You sing, they eat. I record. Everyone cries, the internet claps, and when the fad is over, you're back in the square with a line on your resume." The paper hovered in the air between them. There was poison in the invite. There was also the old trap of humiliating charity. The boy didn't touch it. His eyes moved from the man's hand, up his cuff, his expensive sleeve, and stopped on his face. "I'm not decoration for rich folks' dinners," he said. "I won't sing to dress up empty talk. My voice is to say what I couldn't say any other way." "You're turning down work." The millionaire lifted his chin, triumphant, as if waiting for this mistake to attack. "Hear that, everyone? I offer an opportunity, and he refuses. That's how the poor choose misery over discipline." "Discipline is not selling who you are," came a voice from behind, a calm, middle-aged man. "Discipline is holding a no when the yes would come with chains." The words landed like a verdict. The millionaire crushed the paper in his fist, irritated. The gesture, instead of commanding respect, felt like defeat. He turned to his friends, but there was no longer complicity in their eyes, only shame. "You all," he started, searching for ground where his feet no longer held. "You're being carried away by a story. Real life isn't this. Real life is numbers, contracts, goals, results." And, as if to reclaim a crowd that wasn't his anymore, he added, "Your feelings fade. His hunger stays." The boy breathed, chest rising slowly. When he spoke, his voice didn't shake. "Hunger ends when the right door opens," he said. "What stays is who we choose to be when no one believes." No one clapped right away. Those words asked for room inside each person. The square, for the first time, felt truly quiet. The millionaire glanced around and saw he had nowhere left to push his rage. He tried to laugh. It didn't come. His hand dropped heavy into his pocket. He half-turned as if rehearsing an escape, but running would taste like surrender. So he stayed, still. And it was there, in that stillness, that defeat began to smell final. The boy, meanwhile, tilted his head, like hearing a distant sound only he could catch. On his face was a new calm, the kind of calm from someone who had crossed a bridge and wouldn't return. The square, without command, gathered around him. Some stepped closer to ask his name, others to say they felt chills, others only to look closely, to remember this later. The millionaire tried one more move, now low, a whisper meant to sting without being heard. "You'll disappear tomorrow, and no one will remember." The boy didn't answer with words. He only bent down, picked up the coin still shining on the ground, that first one tossed with scorn, and closed it in his hand, like holding a seed. When he rose, the gesture said, "Memories can hurt, but they can also feed." A breeze swept across the square and carried a thread of melody, as if the evening asked for one more song. The millionaire pressed his lips, stubbornly upright before his own shadow. The crowd, however, had already chosen which side it would stand on when night finally came. And in the space between the last word and the next sound, everyone felt something was about to happen that would no longer fit in the square, nor in full pockets, nor in the same excuses. A proof greater than voices and egos was coming, and it couldn't be bought. The square still pulsed with the tension of the clash. The millionaire stood stiff, trying to regain himself, while the crowd closed tighter around the boy, as if shielding him from any new strike. The boy, standing tall, still held the dented coin he had picked up. That small object, born as a mark of humiliation, now seemed like a silent trophy. Suddenly, someone in the crowd stepped forward. A grey-haired man with a worn guitar slung on his back made his way through until he stood before the boy. His presence drew respect, not for his plain clothes, but for the way everyone opened space for him. Whispers spread. He was a professional musician, years playing in bars, events, and some said even recording with known names. He stopped in front of the boy, slowly slid the guitar from his back, and spoke in a calm voice, steady enough for all to hear. "May I play with you?" The boy's eyes widened in shock. No one had ever offered him something like that. For a few seconds, he froze. Then, with a shy smile and a small nod, he agreed. The musician quickly tuned the strings, like a man about to reveal something hidden. The square's silence grew heavier. Even the millionaire, once restless, stayed still, curious and wary. "Pick a song, kid," said the musician. "Anyone. I'll follow you." The boy took a deep breath. His mind returned to a tune his mother used to hum in their rare moments of rest. An old song, simple but full of feeling. He shut his eyes, and when he opened them, the first verse came out like something he'd held inside forever, waiting for the right moment. The guitar slipped in softly, matching every note, lifting the boy's voice. The whole square shivered. The contrast was striking, a raw, pure voice now supported by steady, skilled chords. There was no room left for doubt. The crowd reacted with instant emotion. An older woman covered her face and began to weep. A man who had been filming dropped his phone and simply clapped in rhythm. Even little kids tried to follow the melody, waving their hands. Each line of the song seemed to tear out a piece of pain the boy carried, and with every chord of the guitar, that pain turned into beauty, into strength, into something no one could ever dismiss again. When the chorus came, something magical happened. People in the crowd began to sing along. Voices joined, timid at first, but soon became a strong choir. The square, once a stage for shame, was now a temple of unity. The boy at the center sang louder, as if his voice was fed by everyone's energy. The musician smiled, amazed, and kept his guitar steady, stitching together the sound that filled the air. On the other side, the millionaire looked around, unsure how to react. His friends were no longer beside him. They had slipped away, ashamed, blending into the crowd. The man felt that the more he fought back, the more foolish he seemed. Yet his pride wouldn't let him stay silent. He tried one last remark, loud enough for a few to hear. "This is pretty, sure, but pretty doesn't feed you. Pretty doesn't pay bills." No one answered. No one cared. The music had grown bigger than any words. The melody went on, and every eye was fixed on the boy. The millionaire realized that for the first time he was the invisible one. The end of the song was breathtaking. The boy held the last note with such force it seemed impossible from such a small frame. The guitar closed on a clean, sharp chord that echoed like a period. And then, silence. For 2 long seconds, no one moved. It was as if everyone had to confirm inside themselves that they had truly witnessed it. Then, like a wave, the square exploded in deafening applause. Shouts, whistles, claps that shook the ground. The musician stood, removed his hat, and placed it over his chest, in honor of the boy. Then he said loudly, "This kid is no beggar. He's an artist." The crowd roared back. Some raised their arms, others hugged strangers, swept up by the energy. The boy cried but smiled at the same time. He couldn't tell if he was awake or dreaming. In the middle of the uproar, a TV reporter appeared with a camera and a mic. He had been called by someone streaming live on social media. He stepped up to the boy and asked, "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, shy, and answered softly. The reporter asked him to repeat louder. "My name is Daniel." The whole square shouted his name together. "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel!" The millionaire, unable to bear it, stepped back. He wanted to speak, but his voice died in his throat. He tried to turn away, but the crowd was packed tight, leaving him no path. For the first time, he tasted the bitter flavor of being trapped, not by bars, but by public judgment. Meanwhile, the reporter kept asking Daniel questions. "Daniel, how long have you been singing?" "Since I was little. My mom taught me some songs. She always said my voice could change things." "And what do you want now?" The boy looked around. He looked at the musician still holding the guitar gently. He looked at the crowd still clapping non-stop. And with a steady voice, he said, "I just want to sing. I want my voice to reach where I've never been able to go." The crowd answered with even stronger applause. The musician smiled and laid a hand on his shoulder. "You'll get there, kid, I promise." The millionaire, hearing that, felt a tightness in his chest. It wasn't just jealousy. It was the pain of knowing that all his money couldn't buy what he saw there. Real respect, honest admiration, true emotion. He, with all his fortune, was smaller than that barefoot boy. The crowd no longer cared about the millionaire. He had become a background piece in his own trap. Every eye was on Daniel. The musician turned to the people and said, "You saw what I saw. This boy can't go back to the street tonight. He needs a chance, not spare change." The crowd shouted in agreement. Some pulled bills from their pockets and began dropping them into an improvised hat. But it wasn't charity, it was recognition. Each note, each coin thrown in, carried the weight of an investment, not pity. The millionaire, suffocated, finally found a way out. He walked fast, trying to hold his posture, but phones followed him, recording every step. Behind him, voices rang out, "Daniel, Daniel!" He didn't look back. He couldn't. Meanwhile, the boy hugged the musician, still in disbelief. He clutched the coin once tossed to shame him, but now it meant something else. The reminder of the day his voice changed everything. And the square, roaring with applause, was no longer just a passing place. It had turned into the stage of a boy's transformation from invisible to unforgettable. The square boiled like never before. The people didn't leave. On the contrary, every minute brought more faces, curious ones drawn from nearby streets by the noise and clapping. The name Daniel echoed in unison, like a cry of shared freedom. The musician still stood by the boy, holding the guitar, smiling with pride, as if he had found a raw diamond in the middle of the pavement. Daniel, for his part, seemed stuck between dream and reality. He looked at everyone around, hardly believing those cheers, those smiles, those tears were really for him. In the crowd, phones streamed live. The image of the barefoot boy, in torn clothes, but with a powerful voice, spread through social media. In minutes, thousands were watching from their homes, commenting, sharing, sending support. "This is going to blow up online," said a young man, staring at the screen as the view count climbed every second. Meanwhile, across the circle, the millionaire was suffocating. His breathing was heavy, his eyes restless. He tried to slip out, but the people were packed tight, and every path seemed blocked. His friends, who once laughed at his cruel jokes, had vanished into the mass, maybe ashamed of having joined the show of humiliation. The man tried to look proud, but inside he felt cornered. For the first time in ages, he had no control. Neither money, nor posture, nor tone could force respect. He had lost more than an argument. He had lost the crowd's respect. The TV reporter, seeing the scale of what was happening, took a bold step. He moved toward the millionaire, mic in hand, and asked loudly, "You were the one who dared the boy to sing, weren't you?" All phones swung instantly. The question hit like a strike. The millionaire's eyes widened, caught off guard, and he forced a grin. I was just joking." His voice shook. It was a kind of entertainment. The people booed. "Joke?" a man shouted. "That was humiliation. Entertainment is treating people with respect, not mocking them," said a woman. The boos grew louder. The millionaire tried to explain, but every word only dug deeper. "I only meant to encourage the boy. I thought he could show something of value," but no one bought it. The crowd had already chosen their side. Meanwhile, Daniel stayed quiet, only watching. The musician leaned close and whispered, "You don't need to say anything now. Your voice already spoke for you." But Daniel felt he should. He drew a deep breath, stepped forward, and faced the reporter still holding the mic. "I didn't ask to be humiliated," he said, clear and firm. "But I'm grateful, because in that moment I discovered my voice could be bigger than the shame they tried to put on me." The crowd erupted in claps. The reporter smiled, surprised by the boy's maturity. The mic shook in his hands with the weight of those words. The millionaire, in turn, dropped his head. For the first time, he had no defense. At that instant, a car stopped at the corner of the square. Out stepped a refined woman, dressed simply but with sharp eyes. She carried a folder and looked in a hurry. Someone recognized her and whispered, "She's a music producer, works with big names." The news spread fast. Excitement rose. The crowd parted for her to come closer. She walked up to Daniel, smiled and stretched out her hand. "I watched the live stream and came straight here. You have a gift that can't stay hidden here." Daniel hesitated. He looked at the musician by his side, as if asking for guidance. The man only nodded with a smile. "Trust it, kid. This could be your shot." The producer went on, "I want to take you to a studio. Record your voice. Show it to the right people. Your life can change starting today." The crowd cheered. Some shouted, "Go, Daniel." Others cried with emotion. But the millionaire couldn't take it. He stepped forward, cutting through the scene. "Hold on!" he yelled. "We're not turning a street whim into a career. This kid only sang a couple songs. That means nothing." "You're all fooled." The people fired back with rage. Shouts of "shut up" echoed everywhere. Still the millionaire pressed. "You don't know the real world of music. It's full of rules, contracts, demands. This boy has no discipline, no training, nothing but a lucky moment." Daniel took a deep breath, faced the millionaire and said, "I've got something you'll never have. Truth." The words dropped like a hammer. The crowd burst into claps again. The millionaire stood completely alone. The producer looked at the man, firm. "You may have money, but you can't buy real feeling, and that's what the world is hungry for." The millionaire tried to speak, but the people didn't allow it. The noise drowned him out. He backed away, beaten. Meanwhile, Daniel looked at the producer, then at the musician, then at the people. His hands shook, but his voice was sure when he said, "I accept. I want to sing." The crowd erupted like a championship final. People jumped, screamed, cried. His name echoed louder than ever. The millionaire, now distant, watched the scene with a mix of rage and helplessness. Never in his life had he felt so small. Night was falling over the square, but no one wanted to leave. Everyone knew they were witnessing something bigger than a street show. It was the birth of a new story. And Daniel, with the coin clenched in his hand and the applause still echoing, felt deep inside this was only the beginning. Darkness spread over the square, but the streetlights, mixed with the glow of phones, turned the place into a real stage. Daniel stood at the center, small in frame but giant in presence. The musician with his guitar stayed beside him, and the producer, steady, watched him like someone seeing a star just born. The millionaire, a little apart, breathed heavy. He searched for a way to regain dignity, but every time he lifted his face, he found only looks of contempt. The man once worshipped by flatterers was now seen as the villain. The producer stepped closer to Daniel and spoke loud, so all could hear. "Daniel, I want to ask you something. Sing again, but not to prove anything to this man here," she said, pointing lightly at the millionaire. "Sing for yourself. Sing to remind you that your voice is greater than any shame." The people clapped at her words. Daniel breathed deep. His heart raced. He felt the weight of their hope, but also the lightness of the trust they gave him. The musician tuned the guitar and smiled. "Come on, kid. The stage is yours." Daniel shut his eyes. For a moment, everything faded. The cold, the hunger, the stares, even the figure of the millionaire. Only one memory remained. His mother, singing to him at night, tired but still giving. He remembered her words, "Use your voice, my son. One day the world will hear." And then he began to sing. The first note came soft, almost like a whisper. The square fell silent at once. Slowly the melody grew, filled with feeling, with a strength that seemed impossible from someone so young. Daniel's voice cut through the night, reached every person there, and stirred something buried deep in each heart. The musician followed flawlessly. Every chord was a bridge for the boy's voice to soar higher. The producer watched, moved, with quiet tears down her face. The chorus arrived and, like a shared impulse, people began singing along. The whole square became a choir, led by the boy who had been invisible minutes before. Kids, elders, young ones, all sang. The melody filled the air, broke walls, joined strangers in one voice. The millionaire looked around, stunned. He couldn't believe the scene had slipped fully from his hands. He had started this as a cruel game, but now he was the only one crushed by a show he never imagined. At the peak of the song, Daniel raised his arms, as if giving his soul to the music. His voice hit a long, powerful note that made the people explode in cheers and claps even before the song was done. It was as if the feeling was too big to wait for the end. And when it finally did, the silence that followed was magical. For a few seconds, no one moved, no one spoke. It was like everyone needed to keep that moment safe in memory. Then came the blast. Thunderous applause, cries of bravo, tears, hugs, phones shaking with live streams already reaching thousands across the country. Daniel cried. Tears rolled down, but he smiled at the same time. He was drained, yet it felt like he had just conquered the world. The producer stepped forward, quietly wiping her eyes, and said for all to hear, "This boy is not just a singer, he's a phenomenon." The crowd shouted in agreement. The musician lifted his guitar in the air like a trophy and declared, "You have witnessed the birth of something huge." Daniel looked around and whispered, almost not believing, I'm not invisible." The woman with the scarf, who had defended him through the chaos, replied loudly, "You never were, my son. The world just needed to open its eyes." The chant of "Daniel, Daniel" rose again, even stronger. Meanwhile, the millionaire couldn't bear it anymore. He tried to slip away, but the people opened a path with hard stares, showing their anger. Some booed, others just turned their faces. He walked with his head low, beaten, feeling every look like weight on his shoulders. His arrogance, once making him seem untouchable, was now dust before the greatness of a true voice. The reporter, seeing him leave, fired one last question loud and clear. "Sir, what do you have to say now after all this?" The millionaire froze for a second. He wanted to answer, but nothing came out. The silence was more humiliating than any word. He lowered his head and kept going, swallowed by the crowd. In the middle of the square, Daniel was still the focus. The producer moved, took the reporter's mic and announced, "Tomorrow, I want this boy in the studio. The world needs to hear what we just heard here." Cheers and claps filled the air again. Daniel looked up at the sky as if searching for his mother in the stars and whispered, "I did it, Mom." The musician smiled, resting a hand on his shoulder. "No, kid, you're just beginning." And at that moment, everyone felt they hadn't just seen a street show, but the start of a transformation. The boy who was invisible had become giant. And the millionaire, once untouchable, had been reduced to silence by the strength of what no money can buy: truth, feeling, and the courage of a boy who never stopped singing. The square was no longer the same. The space that earlier in the day was just a backdrop of hurry and indifference was now filled with human warmth beyond words. It wasn't only a boy who had sung. It was as if everyone there had sung with him, each one finding in his voice the piece missing inside themselves. Daniel stayed at the center, gripping the small coin the millionaire had tossed to shame him. That coin was no longer a mark of insult. It was a memory of change. It was the start of a turn no one could erase. The musician, still at his side, took off his hat and moved among the people. He didn't ask for anything. He just held it up and let the crowd act on their own. In seconds, bills and coins dropped inside. But it wasn't pity. Each offering carried the weight of respect. People said as they gave, "This is for your music. Don't give up, kid. I want to see you on big stages." Daniel's eyes filled. Never in his life had he seen so much support, so much energy flowing to him. The producer, on her side, was already on the phone, arranging contacts, setting schedules. She knew she couldn't let that moment slip. She stood before raw talent that, once shaped, could move not just a square, but the whole world. "Tomorrow, without fail," she said into the phone. "I want a studio, I want a team, I want everything ready. This boy is going to record." The people cheered at every word, thrilled with the promise of tomorrow. Meanwhile, the reporter streamed live. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing something extraordinary. A boy who until today was invisible has just become a symbol of hope for us all. His name is Daniel, and his voice is already sweeping the whole country." On the other side of the screens, in homes, in bars, on phones across the city, people cried, commented, shared. The name Daniel climbed the trending lists, and the millionaire. He stood off to the side, trying to slip away, but he couldn't. The crowd, even without staring at him, made him feel small, irrelevant, crushed by something he could never control. His shiny shoes were dusty from the square, and his suit no longer looked like a symbol of power, but of ridicule. Some even laughed watching him try to pull himself together. Others just ignored him. And maybe that was worse than booze: indifference. The man who always chased the spotlight was now only a shadow among the crowd. Daniel, noticing he was still there, looked at him. There was no hate in his eyes, only firmness. And with the coin in his hand, he raised it for all to see. "This coin was thrown to shame me," he said loudly, "but I'll keep it to remind me that even pain can turn into strength." The square roared. The millionaire dropped his head, unable to meet the gaze. The woman with the scarf stepped closer to Daniel, held his hands and said, "You're no longer a street boy, you're a boy of the world." He cried and hugged her. Kids ran around yelling his name. Teens asked for selfies. Adults shook his hands. It was as if he had suddenly become not just a singer, but a living sign of overcoming. The producer spoke again. "Daniel, I want you to know that from today on, you won't be alone. I'll make sure your voice reaches stages you never dreamed of." He looked at her through tears and answered simply, "I just want to sing. I want my voice to bring hope to those who have nothing." The people stood clapping. Meanwhile, the musician placed the hat full of money into Daniel's hands. The boy looked stunned, but the musician explained, "This isn't charity, this is seed. Use it to start your path." Daniel hugged the hat to his chest, moved. The reporter then held the mic close one last time and asked, "What do you have to say to everyone watching you now across the country?" Daniel drew a deep breath. His voice came out strong, steady. "No matter where you are, no matter what they try to do to you, if you carry something true inside, don't let anyone silence it. Your voice may seem small, but one day the world will hear." The words hit like dynamite. People cried, clapped, hugged strangers. His name echoed louder than ever. And the millionaire? He was gone. He used the commotion to slip away, swallowed by the streets, carrying the weight of shame. No one noticed him leave, and for him that was the worst defeat, being ignored. The square now shone only with Daniel. The boy who was once invisible now lit the night with his voice, his story, his strength. The camera zoomed on his face, and in that instant the image of a poor boy, barefoot, in torn clothes but with eyes full of light, spread through the whole country. It was the close of a battle, but also the start of a new life. The square, calmer now, stayed bright, with lights that seemed unwilling to fade. People drifted off slowly, still talking, still moved, like carrying home a secret they needed to tell. In many eyes was the glow of someone who had found back a good part of themselves long hidden. Daniel sat on the fountain's edge. The musician set the guitar down on the bench and stayed at his side, silent. The producer spoke softly on the phone, locking plans for the next day. The reporter left, but twice turned back, as if it was hard to step away from what he'd just seen. "You all right?" the musician asked. Daniel nodded. There were no speeches in him, only breath. He pressed the coin into his palm and looked at the water. where the lights broke into tiny pieces. Strange to think that just hours ago he was only another unseen face in the rush. Now he had a name the whole city chanted. He had a story that told itself. The woman with the scarf returned slowly, as if not to disturb a holy moment. She sat down on the other side. "Can I say something?" she asked. "Sure," the boy answered. "Today you made a lot of people talk to themselves." He frowned, not understanding. "How so?" "Some go through life without ever singing what they carry inside. They stay quiet because they fear the laugh of others. You took cruel laughter and gave back music. That's courage, and courage calls courage." The musician nodded. "She's right. Your voice didn't just rise. It lifted others." Daniel lowered his eyes. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the kind that heals. The producer ended her call and stepped closer, still charged with the energy of someone organizing a whole world. "Everything's ready for tomorrow," she said gently. "But I want to talk with you about one more thing, Daniel. Your heart." He looked at her, curious. "To sing for many, you must always remember why you began. The audience feels when it's true. Today, it was true. I want it to always stay that way." "My mom," he murmured. "Then sing for your mother, even when the mic is huge," the producer replied. "And when the world gets too loud, come back to places like this square. That's where voices remember where they came from." The woman smiled, pleased with the answer. The musician looked at the sky, as if agreeing with the night. The wind blew softly. A paper bag rolled across the sidewalk like a scared little animal. Daniel watched it. Suddenly, he felt a strong urge to say thanks. "Thank you," he said, not sure to whom, so he said it to all. "Thanks for staying, for listening." "We should be the ones thankful," the woman replied. "You gave us back something we didn't even know we'd lost." The musician joked, pointing to his chest. "Inner tuner." "What?" Daniel laughed. "Some people lose the key of their own life. You helped put it back in tune." The producer placed her hand on the boy's shoulder. "Tomorrow we start, but today, keep what happened. Close your eyes and record it like a song. The smell of the square, the glow of phones, the last note, the people's chorus, the coin in your hand. That's your map." He closed his eyes for a moment, kept it. When he opened them, he seemed taller. Across town, in a high apartment, glass windows and furniture that knew nothing of squares, the millionaire took off his jacket with a weariness he'd never felt. He left it tossed on a chair. The expensive watch weighed on his wrist like a shackle. He sat down. The silence of the place, once a sign of power, now felt like a sealed room without air. He opened his phone. Videos, comments, headlines. In many of them, his face showed only as the frame of a hard lesson. "Millionaire tries to shame boy. Silenced by talent. True voice defeats arrogance. The square taught." He breathed deep, wanted to excuse himself as he always had. It wasn't like that. The clip cuts the context. "I was only—" The sentence never ended. There was no context to clean what even a child knows. Dignity isn't a toy. He paced the room, stopped in front of the mirror, looked hard, saw a man with everything and with a hole nothing could fill. For a moment, he remembered being a boy with nothing. "When did I start mocking what I once was?" he asked quietly. He sat again, took a sheet, wrote a few words. "If not to lift, stay silent," folded it, stuck it to the fridge. "Change hurts, but staying the same hurts worse." Back to the square. The musician, with a small motion, pulled the guitar onto his lap. "One last before we go?" he asked. "One last," Daniel answered. "Which?" He looked at the water in the fountain. "The one that speaks of path." "They all do," the woman laughed. "But I got it." The producer smiled and, instead of filming, put away her phone. Some things ask for eyes, not lenses. The guitar began to throb, simple. Daniel joined gently, singing low, like humming inward. There was no crowd, no shouting. Only 4 people in the night. The song said the path isn't a carpet road, but dirt, and the mud that stains your foot is also the mud that shapes the pot. It said falling teaches the step, and hunger trains the ear to hear what excess makes deaf. At the end, he didn't hold the note to impress anyone. He just set his voice down. "Done," he said. "Done," the musician echoed, putting the guitar away. "Tomorrow at 8, the producer reminded. "I'll pick you up here." The woman stood and held Daniel's hands once more. "If someone laughs, sing. If someone doubts, sing. If someone tries to buy what has no price, sing louder. And if one day your voice fails, sing with your body. Posture also sings." "Yes, ma'am." She left. The musician next. The producer walked down the street with steps of someone drawing maps. Daniel stayed last, watching the almost empty square. He walked slowly to the corner where he always sat. A piece of cardboard leaned against the post. He bent down, folded it with care, and leaned it on the bin. Not from shame, from gratitude. It had been his bed. Now it would be memory. Before leaving, he returned to the center and placed the coin on the edge of the fountain. He didn't toss it. He left it there, visible. The light hit it in a beautiful way. "Remember," he told himself, "but don't go back." The lesson of that night isn't complicated. It fits in short lines and clear acts. Don't laugh at anyone's pain. Pain returns as echo. Who has everything may have nothing. Who has nothing may carry the most precious thing, truth. Money buys sound. Respect is bought with humanity. Shaming is always a terrible plan. The bill comes with interest of shame, and talent without courage is seed locked in a drawer. It only blooms when it finds ground, even if it's the cold ground of a square. There's another lesson, the one that stings. When we are the strongest in the scene, be also the kindest. If power doesn't lift, it crushes, and that's never victory. A whole city may cheer a stage, but will only bow before dignity. For those in the square and those watching on their phones, the message stayed clear. It's not the suit that gives height. It's the character. It's not hunger that makes someone smaller. It's the cruelty of those who point and laugh. And above all, it's not the crowd that defines who you are. It's what you do when you're pushed to the ground. Daniel didn't win because he sang pretty. He won because, when laughter came to break him, he chose not to break anyone back. He chose to sing, and singing is, deep down, a way of saying, "I exist, I deserve to be here, I turn what hurt me into song." For those who wonder about the millionaire, here's another lesson. Public shame doesn't always change a person. Sometimes what changes is a note stuck to the fridge, a silence that finally hurts. A memory that pokes at midnight, and maybe later a gesture, an apology without spotlight, support without name, a hand that reaches without camera. Growing in secret is still growing. For Daniel, tomorrow will be noisy. Microphones, lights, rooms where the air conditioning makes the cold too sharp. People with calendars, with deadlines, with promises. That's why the producer said, "Keep the square." It's there that lives the part of the voice that can't be sold, the melody that can't be packaged, the note that exists only because it's true. And for you who stayed here listening to this story, there's a simple request. Don't let your voice die of shame. Maybe it's not singing, maybe it's drawing, writing, cooking, caring, math, carpentry, teaching, healing. The world is full of cheap laughs trying to make you shrink. Do the opposite. Open your chest. If you shake, it's okay. The vibrato of courage is born from the tremble. If one day they throw a coin to measure you, don't kick it away in anger. Keep it as a reminder. You are not the value someone threw on the ground. You are the value you put into what you do. A coin turns into an anchor when you accept others' judgment. It turns into a seed when you decide to grow anyway. The square will go back to being a square. Rushed people, sellers, horns, life rushing. Daniel soon will be elsewhere, but now and then the city will remember that night when a barefoot boy taught everyone to use the gift they had and had forgotten, to listen. Because hearing truth stings first and frees after. When the lights finally go down, the fountain water will still make its same sound, as if repeating in an endless whisper the moral no one forgets. Never underestimate the unseen, never trade dignity. And when they try to silence what's real in you, sing. The final lesson can be told in one last image. A boy leaves a coin on the stone, the lights shine, the night breathes, and a path opens. It's not miracle, it's choice. And choice, when repeated every day, becomes destiny. Daniel stands, slips his hands into his pockets, feels the rim of the hat full of seeds, smiles at the square and walks on. The camera, if there were one, wouldn't follow him. Because the best part of the story isn't where he goes, it's where he chose never to leave. Truth. And if tomorrow someone asks what happened in that square, let the answer be simple. A man tried to buy a boy's worth and learned a boy's worth is not for sale. A boy was dared to be silent and chose to sing. We who watched learned the strongest voice is the one that rises when no one believes and still sings. End of the lesson. Life goes on, the music too. And if courage shakes, return to the square inside you and ask your heart, tune, then breathe and sing. Because there's always someone, even if it's yourself, needing to hear.